Do your kids or your husband ever say to you, Doris, you've got to stop living in the past?
Every now and then. I remember when I was writing Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, and my kids said they would come by the room, and I was yelling at Franklin, would you please be nicer to Eleanor? Or saying to Eleanor, forget about the fact that he had an affair 20 years ago. And they're thinking, what is going on in that room? She's talking to dead presidents.
And dead presidents have been very good to Doris Kearns Goodwin. All of her presidential biographies have been bestsellers. She won a Pulitzer for her book on FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt. And her Lincoln biography was the basis of the Steven Spielberg movie.
I can't accomplish a goddamn thing of any human meaning or worth until we cure ourselves of slavery and end this pestilential war.
Her newest book is about the friendship between Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. Unusual for Goodwin in that one of them is not a larger-than-life president, although he certainly was large.
How many people are going to know much about Taft other than that he weighed 350 pounds?
And had a bathtub that could fit 4 men.
And
right?
Indeed, there's a picture of the bathtub with the 4 guys in there.
That is a White House scandal waiting to happen. The two men were a study in contrasts. Roosevelt, a contemporary, wrote, barreled through life as if launched by a catapult.
I've never written about anybody who has more energy, accomplished more. Taft is the great procrastinator. He waited till the last minute for everything, and it got him in trouble over and over again. So I keep saying to myself when I'm about to put something off, I don't want to be Taft in this, I want to be Teddy.
Be Teddy, not Taft. Be Teddy, not Taft.
Right.
Just hearing about him is just chipping away at my self-esteem. I mean, he does more in a page than I get done in a year.
One of my friends thought he drank 40 cups of coffee a day. I haven't quite confirmed that. But he did give the slogan to Maxwell House, good to the very last drop.
To push through his progressive agenda, Teddy Roosevelt forged a winning partnership with like-minded reporters, whom he dubbed muckrakers.
They were at the White House. They had lunch. They had dinner with him. They had breakfast with him.
To keep them close by, he even gave them their own White House press room.
Lyndon Johnson used to say, it's better to have your enemies inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in.
LBJ would be the first of Goodwin's guys, as she calls her presidential subjects.
The whole relationship began because I was a 24-year-old White House intern.
You met him at a dance,
Yes,
right?
I did. I mean, it used to be a badge of honor to say you were a 24-year-old White House intern. It's gotten a little more complicated.
Johnson asked her to dance, then told her he wanted her to work directly for him. But there was something he didn't know.
I'd been a graduate student at Harvard, and I wrote an anti-war, anti-LBJ piece that came out in the New Republic several days after the dance.
Ouch.
So I was sure he'd kick me out of the program, but instead, surprisingly, he said, oh, bring her down here for a year, and if I can't win her over, no one can.
Well, what do you think he saw in you?
He saw a young girl, I think, to be honest. I mean, he was somewhat of a womanizer, but he also saw someone who loved history. He saw someone who liked to listen to him. He loved to talk.
And Goodwin would do a lot of listening when she moved to LBJ's ranch to help him write his memoirs after he left office.
He couldn't sleep, and so he'd come into my room, and I would know that he was coming in, so I would get up even earlier. And then he'd come into the bed,
At around 5 a.m.
5 a.m. He'd pull the sheets up, and mornings were hard for him because he was thinking about all that he had lost. And I would sit in a chair and he'd just talk to me.
You're sitting in a chair in your room, and a former president of the United States is in your bed with the covers up to his neck, just
telling
kind
me
of
stories.
soliloquizing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it seemed natural then. Now I look at it, oh my God, what was going on?
She says she never worried about things going too far, except once.
One day he invited me to go on a picnic by the river, and red check tablecloth and wine and romantic trappings, and I think, oh my God, what's going to happen? And he says, Doris, more than any other woman I've ever known, and my heart sank. And then he said, you remind me of my mother. It was so embarrassing given what was going on. And she was this big, buxom woman, there's no way, except that she was an intellectual. She loved reading, and she would have been, he thought, a great writer.
What Goodwin saw and heard was a man who, outside the Oval Office, felt like the shell of a man.
I think I saw in LBJ a man for whom, even though his family loved him, there was such a hole in his heart that needed to be filled by the love of millions of people, by the crowd. There were no sports in his life, no recreation. Work was the center.
LBJ's was the model of a life Goodwin didn't want to lead. She married White House speechwriter Richard Goodwin and raised a family.
We have 3 boys, and I realized I couldn't do it all. So I gave up teaching, and I just became a writer. I'm still going to Red Sox games an unimaginable number of days. We have season tickets.
She lives in historic Concord, Massachusetts. Do you look at buildings and trees and think, this was here when Lincoln was president?
Yeah, I'm as crazy as you. I do think that.
Most of the rooms in her house, it seems, are libraries.
This is the corridor of presidential biographies.
This is the Goodwin Presidential Library.
This is the Goodwin Presidential Library.
Even the most successful presidents face controversy. So too this presidential historian. In 2002, it was revealed that Goodwin had used passages from other books in her 1987 book on the Kennedys without full attribution. Goodwin blamed her mistakes on sloppy note-taking. What was that whole experience like? Was that an ordeal?
Of course, because I care so much about my fellow writers, it is nothing that I ever intentionally would have done, so it felt bad. And the best thing you can do is to learn from your mistakes and just make sure that you know how to do it right, and I have.
At the Theodore Roosevelt birthplace in New York City, Goodwin remembered how her love of history got started.
If you come here as a kid, you know, as I did at Sagamore Hill, or I went to Roosevelt's Hyde Park thing, you can imagine these people living, walking, getting up in bed, getting up in the morning, and coming.
Her mission now, to make dead presidents come as alive for her readers as they are for her. If you had to be one of these guys, which would you be?
Probably, no question, Teddy Roosevelt. I would venture to project that he was the happiest president we've had. He loved what he was doing. He loved his family. He loved getting up in the morning. He had that energy.
He knew how to work, love, and play.
He knew that.
As for the Teddy-Taft friendship, it broke apart when Roosevelt decided to run against Taft in 1912 under a third party. The two split the Republican vote. Democrat Woodrow Wilson swept into power.
Teddy and Bill are running in last place.
Recently, baseball fanatic Goodwin had the chance to broker a truce.
I suppose part of my dream is that I could bring them back together somehow. So it was amazing. I went to the Washington National Stadium.
Who's it gonna be?
And they have these 2 mascots, Taft and Teddy. So I was able to stand and get them to go together. So my dream was realized. I look like an absolute midget. They are so huge. I look even shorter than I actually am, but it was such a great day.
The Doris Kearns Goodwin peace accord.
Exactly.